Hello and welcome to another edition of Choose to Challenge. I am Luana Bradford with the Bradford Group and the Bradford Group Consulting. And for those of you who are joining Choose to Challenge for the first time on E360, as well as streaming on Facebook and LinkedIn, welcome, welcome. What Choose to Challenge is about, it is really about pushing the envelope, challenging the mindset, systems, institutions, mores that are getting in the way of women expanding and elevating to their best and highest self. It is a platform designed to help women stand in their truth and their authenticity in order to shift the paradigms that we might have in the world and within ourselves so that we can rise up and not only be the change that we hope to see in the world, but the change the world sees. I'm so excited because I have a very special guest today. She goes by the name of Gigi, but her name is Gricelidis Bosse, but she goes by Gigi. So I'll be addressing her as Gigi during this interview. And the one thing that we're going to talk about is life. Life happens, right, to all of us. The good, the bad, the highs, the lows, and she's had an amazing life. But on one hand, she's experienced a lot of great celebrations. She has had the career of her dreams, a beautiful family, found the love of her life. But like many of us, she's also been plagued with some challenges. And some of those challenges have created some mental and emotional stressors for her, which has resulted in her needing to seek out therapy. And I want those of you to lean into this conversation because this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And the one thing that we try to do on this platform is to shift the narrative that's out there regarding mental health, to make sure that when we're talking about mental health and physical health, that they are equal, that we know that we have a balanced and a harmonious existence when we focus on both parts of ourselves. But also, it's important that we get rid of those stigmas and biases out there. There should be no shame when it comes to where we stand and recognizing what it takes for us to be whole, fulfilled, brilliant, vibrant, creative, divine beings that we were designed to be. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And she's going to share a bit about how she ended up facing some depression and anxiety. And many of us don't really want to admit that we may have some of these issues in our lives. But I think when you hear some of her story, you may or may not identify with it. But I guarantee you're going to know someone who has faced these challenges. But then we're going to go a little deeper. And we're going to talk about a recent diagnosis related to complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We've heard about that. We tend to focus more on it when it comes to the military side of life. That's where it began to get a lot of notoriety. But we experience PTSD on a daily basis. And we're going to get into that conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Gigi to the stage. Gigi, how's it going?
Hello.
You doing okay?
Yes. Heart's going pitter patter. A lot.
Breathe. Take a woosah moment. It's all good. Mm-hmm. And thank you so much for agreeing to come on this platform. I believe that this conversation is going to be one that's not only enlightening, educational, but I believe it's going to help someone who needs to hear this message. So again, thank you for saying yes.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. I am very honored.
So I spoke a little bit about, when life was good. And I believe really every day life is good, but sometimes it can get overshadowed with some darkness, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yes.
At what point in your life did you realize, I think an eclipse is starting to come?
Recently, or I've had many eclipses where you realize something has to change. I've always known that I was the driver of my life. I knew that if I wanted change, I had to be the one to cause it for myself, starting with myself, looking in the mirror. And it's very difficult when you don't really know what's happening to you and you're doing your best to just keep moving forward. And so going to therapy really is an amazing, because that's when you realize I can't do this on my own. Um, that's it. There's no, if I understood what you meant by eclipse, like
Yes.
that aha moment, like this is it. This is a breaking point, and I realized that when no matter what I did, um, I kept coming across like I was my own barrier, constantly being my own barrier, and knowing that things were happening to me, but I couldn't put the words to it. I didn't know I had complex PTSD. I didn't know about things like narcissism, really what it was, and how much damage that can do to a family, to individuals. Um, so it's very important that you figure out if you're one, or if that you have them around you, which in my in my case is it's been more of what I had around me. But when you're around that a lot, you have to make sure that you don't yourself start using the same tactics to so there was just too much of that going on, and that was 3 years ago. It was a breaking point, and I had an opportunity for therapy, and it was supposed to be for 3 months, and it lasted a year, and it was one of the best things that really the starting point of truly healing.
Let's talk a little bit about therapy, because in different communities it's more acceptable, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
one of the things that I know that I speak to is addressing the Black and Brown community. When you're talking about therapy, that I'm having mental or emotional challenges, that's taboo. You know, I
Yeah.
I know in certain communities it's like, no, deal with it, pray about it, but you don't share it, right?
Yeah.
You
Oh
keep
yes.
you keep it in, but you don't
Yes.
go out. In
Yes.
therapy, you really have to be honest,
Hmm.
be transparent, and be vulnerable. So can
It's
you walk
scary.
us through that a little bit?
It was very scary because one of your biggest fear, everybody's fear, is looking bad in some way, feeling shame in some way. And with therapy, it was very hard to really. I had a lot of anger inside. I cried a lot. For many months, it was a lot of uh, um, her having to walk me through and remind me, yes, it's okay to vent and to work on it, to work on what I was talking about. What did help is that I always use positive things, like positive affirmations, positive things to help keep my mind in a more positive dialogue. It was very stuck in a very negative dialogue. So having to talk to the therapist, I'm from a Spanish culture, Latin culture. So, you were raised being spanked, and I'm not saying anything against that. Was just the way it was. There was nothing, my two, I was, a couple spankings in the bottom as well. And then we know now how terrible that is. So I'm not condoning her. I'm not talking, about that. But you're going through the therapy. I was, to me, saying anything was putting my dirty laundry out there, having everybody, I wouldn't go online. I refused to stay. I wouldn't go onto Facebook. I have nothing online because I was so afraid of anything being seen, that vulnerability of people knowing that, you were doing so well and you're doing so great. And then these things happen and I didn't even understand what was happening. Um, so when, when going through the therapy, um, there was some parts that were also difficult because I was also dealing with narcissism, and therapy tends to help you get through where everybody's doing their best to play the same game, right? Everybody's trying their best for the other
We're,
individual.
we're, we're we're
And
talking about how therapy helped you to, as I said, become vulnerable. Well, first
yes,
of all, you have to be willing, right?
yeah,
So
yes,
being honest, being
yes,
vulnerable,
yes,
being transparent.
yeah,
And how do you do that, right? Because first of all, as you just mentioned, I don't want to air my dirty laundry, right? And there's
Right.
all this conditioning from our
Yes. Yes.
upbringing, right? We're strong.
Yes. Yes.
We don't do that. We can get over
Yes.
it. We can pray. We everything but telling someone outside the family.
Right.
You make a
Because you,
choice to go
yeah.
outside.
Yes.
How did you even get through that self-talk?
Uh, well, um, when, because I knew I needed something. I needed something positive, and I was very isolated. Um, when you have complex PTSD or any form of PTSD, but the line is in the room all the time. There's always danger. You're already hypersensitive, ready for everything to go wrong. I used to always say, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And now I know why I used to always say that, because that was my thing. I used to always prepare for the worst case scenario. And I always saw the worst case scenario. So I knew that I couldn't do it on my own. And there were too many things that I was starting to question about myself. Because I was coming across too much of the no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. And it's like, okay, am I the common denominator? Is it me? Because I don't want it to be, if I'm hurting people, if I'm doing something, I want to stop that. I was doing my best with my children to raise them, my husband's children to raise them, which they're mine as well. I have pictures of all of them back there. And I just, you do your best, especially I'm a very empathic person. So for me, the struggle has always been very difficult, because I always want to make everybody happy, be that people pleaser. But the shame became much, the feeling like something was wrong. And when I sought out the original therapy, it was kind of one of those things where it tells you, you need therapy, you need therapy. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to seek it out and do the best I can. And come to find out that there were two things that were very prevalent, which was I had a very difficult time with boundaries, not my boundaries, but having other people respect my own boundaries. And that comes from a lot of the abuse and all of that, where you don't even know how to self-regulate. There's a lot that's very difficult. I have like little notes here that tells you like what each one, how it does. But I didn't.
Let me pause just 1 second, because you're saying something pretty profound right here.
Okay.
When you're saying boundaries, and sometimes we feel that, and I'm going to say especially women, right? We need to be all things for all people. It's all about wearing all these multiple hats. Yes. And even though we say we have these boundaries, we ourselves don't respect them.
Right.
Right. And then, like I hear, there's these layers, right? So if you don't have boundaries, then you literally put yourself in harm's way, where you can become victimized by any
Yes.
type of abuse, right?
Right.
Emotional, physical.
Yeah.
And then from that trauma, post-traumatic stress can evolve. So it's like little grains building upon each other, and suddenly you've got this weight of, now what do I do? And yes. I love and I applaud and salute you that you realize I can't do this alone. Someone out there has to help me right this ship.
Yeah.
And I just encourage those of you that are listening, if you are in any place where you feel that it doesn't even have to be a crisis mode, but it's a place where you don't feel things are right. It is okay. You are not alone. It is okay to say, I need help. Yes. It's okay to reach out. It's okay to talk to people. And I want to just say that this episode is for infotainment purposes only. We're not coming as professionals in the arena.
Yeah.
We're coming as advocates, right? It's advocates to say mental health matters. Well, and so we have here the number 800-662-4357. If you're in crisis, you could also text in the U.S. 988 or chat on 988lifeline.org. I'm going to turn it back over to Gigi.
I basically what really happened, I just couldn't get out of bed anymore. I found I'm sorry. That's my dog. I couldn't, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. I knew when I wasn't like having to take a shower was I had to take a shower. It wasn't that I even wanted to. I didn't want to make dinner for anybody anymore. I lost all interest in everything. And that was because it was going unchecked. You know, when you have a mental illness, something going on, it is important to get guidance and to get help, because when it goes unchecked, it leads to a lot of, that's where mental health disorders come into place. That's where we get riskier behaviors, or we don't even understand what we're doing and we're blowing up at everybody or fighting with everybody. And that's because it's going unchecked. So yes, therapy, I realized that was the turning point. I needed help. When I went to the first therapy, she taught me about boundaries and narcissistic individuals, because everything she had heard me talk about for the first 2 sessions, which all she did was just give me information. We have a short 3 sessions, so it was my first taste of therapy, but I did it. And she provided me a 3rd day. She said, you need 2 things, a whole worksheet on boundaries and a worksheet on narcissism. And that was the beginning. It helped a little bit, especially the boundaries. I started creating boundaries. And what happened is that the people that don't respect your boundaries, bombs start, it's like little bombs start happening and problems start happening. And the first thing they tell you, when you have a lot of negative, toxic people or environment around you, is to push them away. Not, throw them out the window, but push them away. You need to get them away from you, because they're not respecting your boundaries. And obviously you yourself don't even know what those boundaries are. So that's very, that was the first one. The second one was really difficult because, well, first I had to agree to do it. It was a family counsel. It was a counseling that does for full family. And my husband's 3 children were going through a lot of situations with their mother, and a lot of social service was involved. And they contacted me, and I agreed to do the therapy because they did it as a whole, as a family, which I thought that was very beautiful to be able to do, heal everybody, right? And that's where I learned that any trauma I have, most likely my mother had it and my family had it, and because it's usually passed down. So there were a lot of traumas that, she was on survival. My mother, I was on survival. Everybody's usually on survival. So that's the part of that I really learned with therapy, was to also have compassion for all point of views. From the people doing the traumatizing, sometimes it's intentional, but a lot of the times it isn't. A lot of times it's not intentional as well. So it was very, it helped me to be able to understand what was happening. I did have to apply things daily, because the 1 day a week that I was talking to a therapist was a beautiful, I got a lot off my chest. We got to talk a lot. I cried a lot. A lot, resolved a lot, but it was also the daily, the positive affirmations. I needed to reprogram my brain because of the complex PTSD, because PTSD is a sudden death in the family, military, natural disasters, right? Sexual assault, one time. And that's not discounting it whatsoever. That's why the reactions are so severe with PTSD. With complex PTSD, it's more of it's a long-term, gradual, repeated trauma, typically starting from childhood, and the traumatic events can go from 1 day to several years, right? From neglect, hunger. I'm just naming a few because my mind goes on blank, but physical, emotional, sexual abuse, chaos and crisis at home, domestic violence, captivity. Those are the things that kind of that that cause the complex part. That's why it becomes complex. And that's why it's harder to regulate, because I'll have all of a sudden just my husband will put on some music and it's a song I've loved, but I can't even hear it because all of a sudden I'll start crying. And if I really sit down and do a meditation and start focusing on where it comes from, it usually links right back to some traumatic event that I didn't even realize that's where it was coming from. So, if you're having, there's a lot of symptoms, right? Like if you're, emotional dysregulation is one of the biggest ones, because you have very hard time. That's why I cry at a drop of a hat. I could watch a commercial and I'm crying. Somebody could say something to me and it becomes very emotional. We just got started in a podcast. Not podcast, with the interview. And I started tearing up right away and got emotional. I had to keep reminding myself, the lion is not in the room. You're fine. You're safe. It's okay. No one's going to eat you alive right now. But anxiety, disassociation, which a lot of people don't think about that one much, where you figure like you can just separate yourself from individuals or things that you have a lot of emotion to, but you can just completely disassociate yourself with them. And that's a protective mechanism. Difficulty trusting and in relationships. So those are, if you feel that you have kind of like that, the big one here was the negative self-perception and the distortion of my beliefs and the world around me. Everybody became a narcissist. Everybody had complex PTSD. I was like, you have a hard time, so I would tape myself talking, and then I would listen to what I said, and I would be like, oh, no, that's not exactly the way. No. So you have to do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of it's a walk every single day, one day at a time. I don't want to mess with my camera or anything, but I had bought a plaque and it says one day at a time. Just, that's it. Just, and I would look at it. They moved in different places in my house depending on where I needed it next. It was just take one day, baby steps, just baby steps. And it's been 3 years. I started 3 years ago. And this is the first time in the past month that I feel like a human being, like normal, that I get up and I have my makeup on and I go for a walk with my dog and I exercise and I'm involved with people and I'm hanging out with friends. And, and that was after 15 years of pretty much being a hermit, just shutting myself out because it was just too much to handle. Everything that I had put in place to help me deal with growing up and with my family. I'm not going to say my mother because it's not just hers. My whole, like we have it's a whole caboodle. It's not just one individual ever. So, between family and previous marriage and just having a lot of difficulty in a pop culture world with raising children. But I was doing better. And then, and then of course, life changing, I moved to another country and with a new family. And it just, it became everything that I had put in place to help me up until that point, just crumbled. Everything was just gone. It was just, I had nothing left in place. And it was a gradual 15 years to where there was a good 3-month period in there. I wasn't getting out of bed at all for almost a whole day. When I didn't have children, I just wouldn't even get out of bed. To then, it slowly. But for the past 3 years since therapy and knowing what's wrong, the change has been fast and I'm happy with the change. I'm happy with myself right now. I'm happy with what's around me. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but I have no regrets, right? And I'm I'm doing the best I can every day to move forward and have a better life, because it mental health is out there and a lot of people have it. It's everywhere, and it's increasing with what's going on with the world. And I not only want to heal, but I'm such an empath by nature and teacher. I was a teacher, and I love to bring a smile to people's faces and make them happy and cook good food. And so I just want to bring all that back in my life and to help other people feel great too. They don't.
I love that, and it's amazing that sometimes through our lived experiences, challenges, traumas, we find our purpose, we find
Yeah.
our passion. And I think just in our prior conversations, you're taking all of this and it's like, okay, I've learned this and I've got some tools now to
Yes.
help me.
Yeah.
Now, how can I create this safe space for others?
Yes.
How can I share what I've learned? How can I show them there is hope on the other side? Because so many people, Gigi, feel like there is no hope. They feel
Yeah.
that they are alone. They
Yeah.
don't have the financial means to even seek therapy.
Yeah.
That's why now the apps that are coming out, the different, therapy apps are creating affordable ways.
Yes.
There are individuals who are, again, within our Black and Brown communities, when we look at the therapists around the world, those professionals, there are
Yeah.
not a lot of people professionally that look like you and me.
Right.
The numbers are small. And
Yeah.
for many communities, in order to feel safe, you want to be able to relate to someone who can relate culturally to maybe
Yes.
what you've
Yes.
experienced, right? Like you said,
Yes.
you grew up, spanking was okay. I grew up, spanking was okay.
Yeah.
That's just the way the culture was,
Yeah.
right? But if
Yeah.
I'm talking to someone about this and they can't relate, it automatically creates this chasm that we're trying
Yeah.
to bridge.
Yeah.
One of the things that you're doing now, like you said, you're out, you're feeling good about yourself, is it's giving you a way to say, okay, I can now tap into this entrepreneurial bug in a different way.
Yes.
And I can create messages, I can create educational packages. You've got this podcast that's about to launch. What do you hope to achieve with this?
Bring others peace. Um, it is a very dark space to be in when you have lost your self-worth and you feel ashamed for even existing. So, and there are so many hurting people, and there's so much happening in the world everywhere today, like you said, with apps and everything that's coming out. So, it, I turned 50 and that was the first time I got therapy, and it was free, by the way. It wasn't paid. I would have never been able to do it if it was not something that was offered to me as a way to help with my situation that was so toxic and negative. That so that was a big help. That was a blessing, right? To get that for free.
Hi,
Sorry.
we're going to do a quick breakaway. We are here with Gigi Bosse, and we're talking about complex PTSD, a journey of healing. And we're here during Mental Health Awareness Month. And for those that are tuning in, you've heard and seen her passion and compassion when it comes to creating awareness, to get rid of the stigma, the biases, to show the world that there is hope, there is another way.
Yeah.
But you have to be committed to you. You have to, despite what the world is saying around you, or you think the world is saying around you, you got to believe that you do matter, that
Yes.
you're not alone, that you weren't an accident.
Yes.
You're a divine impression, and you are loved. Believe it or not, you are loved. We'll be back in a moment. There are many choices of therapies that we can take. You know, it's basically putting things in your own personal toolbox to help you get centered, to release anxiety, to breathe. And one of the things that I did at the beginning of the pandemic, I just felt that there was a real need to have women in conversation. So I created this panel. It was called, it was a mental health panel with women. It was entitled "Let's Get Loud About Mental Health," and these were all individuals like yourself who were major advocates. And I have to admit, Gigi, when I started, I was the facilitator of the panel, and we met monthly, and then got picked up by a TV network. But I came in facilitating, and I'm listening to them and listening to the conversations they're sharing and the tips and the tools. And I arrogantly said, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be this person who's helping to facilitate this, because there's definitely people who need it, but I'm good. I've never had that issue. I mean, I literally said this on camera.
Yeah.
So this is full transparency. This is beginning of the pandemic. Now, remember, pandemic shut down. No one as human beings are meant to be in isolation.
Yeah.
Are meant to be void of human touch.
Exactly.
And community. Well, I live alone. So when we shut down in February, the very first time I had another person physically touch me was my birthday on May 22nd of that year.
Oh, wow.
So can you imagine, and me and many others, think about your seniors, think about other people who are living alone, who did not have human touch.
Yeah.
And when I received that hug, I broke. And I realized, something's happening that I didn't know. And I say that and I share that. For those of you that think I got it, I'm good, never had that issue, everyone has a breaking point.
Yeah.
You just don't know what will take you there. And for me, it was, again, even though I had my online communities and I'm doing things and I'm staying busy, I'm a touchy-feely person.
Yeah.
And when I didn't have it, I thought, I'm good, until I felt it again. And I realized I'm not good. And I'm so grateful for those women in the panel, because during those months, I was listening, and their tools and techniques that they were sharing with our audience, I used. Because I realized, Luana, you're not good right now. And even like now, another chapter in my life is I have aging parents. My dad's 92, mom's 87. And they're doing well, but they have their issues, as most would at that age. And dealing with the fact of that mom and dad may not be here forever. And I'm noticing, like you said, sometimes you're going through and all of a sudden you start crying.
Yeah.
That happened to me yesterday. I'm on a call talking to a friend and I just broke down. They're like, "Are you okay?" I think, like, I'm having a breakdown.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay to cry, actually.
It's okay to release it, to recognize it. Whereas 4 years ago, I would have quickly, let's get strong. You're an alpha female.
Yeah.
No.
You actually rob yourself of some healing when you hold it back. It is a way of releasing. I mean, it could be later a crutch if all you're doing is crying and just every week, then it's a crutch. But it is a very healthy form of release. And Spanish culture, we weren't allowed to cry. If we cried, we got spanked. It got even worse, right? So
yeah, I'll give you something to cry about, right?
I'm glad we can laugh about it. Generations now are like, what? Unheard of.
Exactly. Well, before we have about 10 more minutes, and I want to talk now about tell me a little bit about what you're going to do on your entrepreneurial journey so people can look out for that, and tell us a little bit about this podcast.
Well, my entrepreneurial journey is something I've actually always wanted. It's something that that I've dreamed up for about a good 25 years. Um, and it was actually, it was, I'm going to say it because when I saw what your organization, everything, I'm like, oh my goodness. It's a nonprofit organization. It's actually called the Six Dimensions of Health and Wellness. Now that it changed the name a little bit, because that was 20 years ago when I'd learned that there were six dimensions of health, and most people only really focus on like one or two of them. So it's very healthy to focus on all six dimensions. So that has been always a dream of mine. Now it has changed a little bit, where it's now I have a dream. It's called it's called a U pick. I used to call it pick and pull by accident. My husband's like, don't call it that. That's a a dump, where the people go and for car parts. I'm like, whoa, no. But it's a large garden. It's a large vegetable garden. And it is, yes, for people to come and purchase, but it's, for me, it's really a starting point to start help feed the homeless. We're going through a lot right now in the world, and I may not be able to do anything for Uganda or anybody else right now, but I can start somewhere here locally. I've never seen it here before since I've lived here in Alberta, Canada. I've never seen the amount of homeless now that we see walking, and never saw that before. You just really didn't see that here. You didn't see that so prevalent here, and now you do, and it's like, I'm used to that from the United States, but living here, I didn't see that, and it's just that the desire to just want to feed people. I grew up experiencing hunger myself, and it is a very it's not something easy to deal with, and there are a lot of children, there's a lot of adults, people just going hungry right now. So that's part of it. I just really want to be involved nonprofit and help people get food in their stomachs. I love to cook.
I love that. And like you said, you may not be able to reach across the waters, but you're able to influence in your sphere of influence. And I always tell people, Gigi, when you change one life, when you give hope to one person, you've changed the next generation. So it's like you think, okay, I may not be making a difference, but it's a radical shift in mindset that then they can teach.
Yes.
And it just, and so on and so on. So I think that's beautiful. And the homeless population is growing, and we don't hear enough conversations about it.
No.
Women, children are out there with nothing, right?
Well, I was surprised to even found out that, I know myself, I was one of the few that I knew growing up in school that never had lunch or never had food. But it is incredible how much nowadays there are families and local, where we feel, we're privileged, compared to what's happening in the rest of the world. And there are people going hungry right next door, children going without meals because their parents' family just can't afford it. And so that and for whatever reasons, it's almost like saying, I don't care about the reasons. I just want to help the individuals. I want to, I know what it is to feel hunger, and there's so much happening out there, even more so than I'm not, there are people that are dying of starvation right now, literally just from not having any food to eat, not having any aid. So that's
I want to say something, because you mentioned what it's like as a child to not have lunch, and we're here about mental wellness. Well, think about it. If you are a child in school and you're hungry, how that impacts you from physical, mental, emotional, your ability to focus. I mean, your ability to learn. There is so much. And during the pandemic, again, this was something that a lot of people weren't talking about. Many schools in the U.S., in fact, most have, and in Western cultures, have the lunch programs at school. Okay, there's no school.
Right. So kids aren't eating.
Right. So now what? And so you
Now,
had organizations, like the
yeah,
one that that you're about to start, that stepped in.
yeah, yeah,
So sometimes it's like, okay, out of sight, out of mind, but there's still, that young child or families
yeah.
that are struggling day to day. And even one of the conversations that I loved what Pampers was doing during the pandemic, many mommies weren't able to diaper their babies.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I was one of those young moms that went through that for like a week where I couldn't diaper my walking child, and I remember crying to her, telling her at 9 months, please, I can't diapers. And she actually potty trained that way. Like she ended up ironic, which it was like, wow. Both my children potty trained very young, but I was also a very young mother with not that much money with diapers. So
Huh.
yeah,
Yeah, I love what you're doing. I love the vision that you have. Um, your heart, that energy is just coming through.
oh, thank
Tell us a
you.
little bit about the podcast.
Well, the podcast was born because for the past 2 years, for many years, I've always loved using meditations, visualizations, affirmations. They were, prior to that was a way of elevating myself. This past 3 years is getting through the day, trying to visualize a more positive day, and having um, helping change the conversation, the negative conversations. I to say something real quick on the side, the one big thing that was a big aha for me was to learn that we say to ourselves roughly 70 to 50,000 sentences a day. So all of the things that we've ever gone through in our lives are going on consistently in the back of our minds. And so if you don't deal with the trauma, guess what's going to keep coming up? So if you did it at 5, you're also a 5-year-old brain still dealing with that same trauma, and it keeps developing and getting worse and worse. So um that's on that note, about that. And that threw me off. I'm sorry. So,
No, no, I
so
want to share. I want to share an experience that I had. So whenever I say goodbye,
yeah.
saying goodbye is hard for me. You can drop me off at the airport and I get teary eyed because I'm saying goodbye to you. And I would wonder, it wasn't until I got older that I thought, well, why am I always crying? Because all my family knows, okay, Moana's going to be waterworks. And I just started meditating and thinking like, okay, this is obviously rooted way back. What happened? And I was always told, oh, you're like your great grandfather. He would always cry. I finally found the source. And I had to, as a child, forgive. And so now, yeah, I don't like saying goodbye. But I would cry so much, Gigi, that I would get physically sick. I would get migraines and everything.
Yeah.
But what happened was when we moved to Europe, my grandfather said, no, we want to keep her. We want to raise her. Don't take our only grandchild. And it was a memory I had repressed. But then it's like I can see it just as though it just happened. He took me behind in the garden, and he's like, we're just going to hide here, and your mom and dad will drive away, and we'll be here together.
Oh.
And my parents found us, and my dad is ripping me out of the arms of my grandfather.
Yes.
So imagine a 3-year-old, how traumatic that is, right?
I was ripped out of my father's arms at 3. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and so it's just, and I'm like, why am I always crying every time I say goodbye? But it's, again, that memory.
Yeah.
You can't at that time associate it with anything. But once I made the connection, I'm like, okay, I forgive mom and dad. It wasn't that they,
Yeah.
they wanted us to stay together as a family. But again, as a 3-year-old, you can't process. It's like,
exactly. So that stayed, and then
why?
Yeah. Especially if he made you feel safe as well,
Yes.
like very safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt.
He was an amazing man, and yeah.
Yeah.
But this conversation, I hope that those of you who are listening can hear that sometimes it's those little micro traumas,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That
Well,
just start to build and build,
yeah.
and we don't know how to deal with it. We don't have the tools.
No, that's why the affirmations helped, because I would wake up in the morning and I would start doing dishes or something, and I would hear myself having these negative conversations and arguments with the people that I was upset with.
Mm.
And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm having this conversation by myself. My brain does not know the difference of this being real or not. I cannot have these conversations. I need to change my conversations. And I try to reach back to, I said, okay, I'm going to reach back to everything that I knew that worked before. And those things that worked before, I need to start doing them again. They're not going to be the same because I've changed, the world has changed, but at least I can reach back to what I knew was positive. That's always important when you're stuck in that world of negativity. If you just stop and just reach back to what used to work, what was positive, what was something to help you get through, hold on to that, because that can be a lifeline. And that's what the meditations were. Now, a lot of the times they played in the background while I was doing other things, but I would pick up the information, and then I would listen to positive affirmations and say them out loud and say them out loud. And if there was something that bothered me, I said, "Uh-oh, what's that?" That's a positive thing. Why am I having a hard time saying I'm worth it? Why can I not say that? So then I had to go and think, why do I think I'm worth it? And looking up, anything I could find online, looking for more So what happened is that I found myself trying to create a playlist for each thing that would help me, and it was just, there's so much out there, and there were things that were geared generally. There were a lot of things that were, I would need to hear 5 to give me the one that I needed just for anxiety, for example. So I'm not saying any of it was wrong. No, they all helped. They were amazing. But after 3 years, I was like, I need that one said in a male voice, not female voice, because I have some issues right now with the female voice that's triggering me. I'm just going to change it this way. So I decided to do meditation on male voice, female voice, and a child's voice for a child. Maybe you want your child to be able to go through some anxiety walkthrough or something like that. Nothing medical. I'm not a therapist. This is just tools. It's like a journey with me, right? This is something that, my grandson is going through some things, and like all children these days, my grandchildren, and they have a lot of anxiety as well about what's happening. And I've always, children were always part of my purpose. So of course, if I'm thinking of podcasts, I'm thinking I have to do something with them too, and so that's with the podcast. And like the books, that one came out of the blue 2 weeks ago because my older brother is a wonderful artist. Cruz, I'm gonna throw it in there. If it has to come out, it's okay. But he's making now children's coloring books, and I was like, oh, I can't draw, but I love to write, Carlos. Come on, let's collaborate. Let's do it. So I'm reeling him into that one, and I'm very excited about that because I love working with children. I was a preschool teacher before, and a English teaching teacher for Spanish speaking students from kindergarten to grade 2. So that was a lot. That was beautiful experiences working with children. So I want to incorporate that in my life as well. I just want to help them from the bottom. I'm not saying I'm the therapist by far, no, but if I can write a book that a child is going through some difficulty and make them feel that it's not their fault, that they shouldn't feel the shame, that they are worth it, and to have hope.
I love that, and that's so important that there is no shame, that it's okay to tell our stories. And like you said, you can take your story and now I can make it relevant and relatable, whether it's a child, whether it's a teen, whether it's an adult, whether it's a senior.
Yeah.
And it's important that we again keep sharing, keep challenging the stigmas, the biases that are out there. Mental health matters. We have just 2 more minutes before we sign off. I'm going to do another breakaway, and then when we come back, Gigi, I would like you to take the next 60 seconds to share your lasting thoughts with the audience. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to take myself down and give you a few moments to just encourage and share whatever you like with our audience.
Okay. What I would like to share, the main message I want to say is that no matter what is happening in your life, no matter what you're going through, you're human. Those around you are human. And everybody really is trying their best. So seek the help that you need. Work on yourself daily. Love yourself. Forgive yourself. We all make mistakes. And I really hope peace and happiness for everyone.
This was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Definitely want to have you back once you get your podcast launched.
Yes.
We can talk a little bit about how things are going with that.
Yes. I didn't want to part putting myself out there. I don't quite have anything out yet.
I know it's in process. So
Yes.
This has been great. And again, ladies, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, this is for infotainment purposes only. We're here with Gigi Bosse, and she is a passionate advocate with a compassionate heart, trying her best in her sphere of influence. Not only trying, she's doing it. She's shifting and changing the narrative. She's making a difference. She's showing everyone through her lived experience that you matter. Life happens, right?
Yeah.
But you can shift, you can change, you can rise up. But it's a day-to-day journey, and that's okay. Live in the now, be present. And as we always say here within Choose to Challenge, just remember that in life and in business, when your vision intersects with opportunity, success is inevitable. So don't be afraid to challenge. Reach out and seize and demand to live your best life.
Yes.
Because we all just have this one life to live. Please reach out to Gigi. You can reach her on Facebook and Instagram. And we will see you next week on another edition of Choose to Challenge. Thank you so much, Gigi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.